Hello, and welcome back to the Work Cultured podcast. Today we've got Bill Benjamin. He is the partner and keynote speaker for the Institute for Health and Human Potential. And this is going to be an interesting one. It's a little bit outside the realm of a normal guest, but we've been doing that lately. So this should be different and familiar all at the same time. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining the show today. Welcome.
Great to be here, and I love being described as outside the realm of normal.
I hope that is a compliment. I hope that was genuine.
Absolutely.
Hey, how about you give us a quick, just intro, high level, who are you, where are you, and how'd you get there?
Yeah, I mean, my story starts with, well, obviously, my story starts as everyone's story in childhood, but for the purposes of this session, starts in college. I have degrees in mathematics and computer science. And so, I was kind of highly analytical, technical background. I went to work for a computer software company for 14 years. And of course, what do organizations do with their high performers? Well, they promote them, make them a manager. Well, it turned out I wasn't a very good manager. People didn't really like working for me. And this is at a time when my life when I was struggling quite a bit, both personally and at work. And I got introduced to the content that I'm about to share with you. And it really made a difference for me. I actually stayed at the computer software company, did the training and the coaching, the assessments and everything. And it really made a difference for me. And then eventually I decided to leave the computer software industry, and this is 24 years ago, do this for a living. So that's how I
Yeah.
made the transition from, kind of highly technical, analytical work to emotional intelligence and culture.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Especially, I've seen your personality assessment results that you took the Aptiv Index, and
Mhm.
you're not a profile we would see like really loving software and computer science. Now, maybe you have that math brain, but like getting into the weeds and staying there doesn't seem like your jam. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I realized fairly early on that sitting in a dark room coding 5,000 line COBOL programs, it was not going to be my where I was going to shine. So I did
yeah.
figure out fairly early on that doing things that involve people, uh, you know, we're going to help. We're going to make
Okay,
a difference.
good. Good. Well, I'll get into why I refer to you as outside the realm of normal here in a second. But first, you're in the hot seat. I already warned you, right? We ask every guest the same first question. So you're no exception. Bill, tell me about a mistake that you've made in leadership that you'll never forget.
Yeah, that's an easy one. When I was first promoted, I thought that the way you led, my models for coaches and leaders were my high school basketball coach and what I saw of college football coaches on TV. So I literally thought you ran around and yelled at people and told them what to do. By the way, that's what my father did. He yelled at me. So I literally used to yell at people. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And the computer software company I worked at, I wasn't the only one. It was actually considered kind of acceptable. The owner would yell, but it just created this really toxic environment. And I really added to that. And so I learned fairly quickly about the negative effect it had on me and my mental health. Never mind everyone around me and our performance. I mean, it really dragged us down. So that whole style of, leading and coaching was a mistake that I made early on in
Yeah.
my career.
Wow. I mean, to lead with that makes sense. I mean, if it's all you've ever really seen, that's been your example. Of course, that's kind of where you'll gravitate towards. Uh, but to shift away from that is not a very common story to hear. I'm really curious about that. And I see on your website, you talk about emotional intelligence. I imagine that's a key factor. Um, but that style of leadership, the football coach kind of, yell, whatever, that's not one you see a lot of people recovering from, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Yeah,
Uh,
the yell and tell. I mean, the good news is we do see that because that's what we do for a living.
yeah.
It's very hard to recover from without some help.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think everybody somewhere along in their life should either have a therapist or a coach.
Hmm.
So I've had both, and so I think gaining some of the insights that I gained about it's kind of how my brain responds under pressure, the importance of what we call last 2% moments, and then learning some strategies to manage my emotions and be more skillful in my last 2% moments, my challenging moments, is what really did help me shift
Wow, that's
and make the
awesome.
change. So yeah, but you need help, really. I mean, I did.
Yeah. So normally we have, a CEO or a head of HR, and we're getting their perspective on how they have to create programs and incentives and value systems, whatever it might be, to build and sustain a strong culture in their organization. You're coming from a different angle. You're coming in as a consultant or just a person who has developed a program to help these other leaders. So your clients are my guests essentially,
Yeah.
which is why you're kind of outside that realm of normal. So tell me about this program, or tell me about just what is the big uh, overarching theme of what you do and how it impacts culture.
Yeah, I'd say there's kind of two pieces to it. One is the content, and one is the process. And by the way, I do own and run a business. It's not on the
Sure.
scale of many of your guests, but I do also get to experience some of this. But I
True.
also, work over the years hundreds of different organizations and leaders. So have some perspective. So from a content perspective, it really does start with this thing we call the last 8%, which are the difficult moments. We're all pretty good at the 92% when everyone's getting along and the deadlines are being met. But when there's tension, when there's pressure, when there's conflict, most of us struggle in those last 8% moments. And the reason that they're so important that we focus on them is because of the cortisol effect. And the cortisol effect is that when there is tension and pressure and conflict, cortisol gets released into your brain, which does a number of things. But one of the things it does is it causes memory to sear in. So people remember how you show up in those difficult moments. So those times I was yelling at people, that's what people remember. That's why you can do something you can do it right 9 times out of 10, but that one time you do it wrong, that's what she remembers. That's what they remember, right?
That was an
It,
intentional slip. Okay, go
it
ahead.
is. I actually accidentally said it once, and it got a really big laugh. So
Yeah.
now I do it intentionally. Um, So these last 8% months are really critical to establishing, your reputation, and particularly for someone as a leader, then it establishes the culture, because then that becomes what people model. So these last 8% moments are critical. And when we think of the last 8%, it really is about risk taking, because high performance requires risk. We need people, getting outside their comfort zone, doing things that are uncomfortable, having tough conversations, naming inconvenient truth, making, tough strategy and people decisions. But the brain is actually wired to default to protection and not risk.
Hmm.
So that last 8%, which by the way, we did a study of 34,000 people and determined on average it's 7.56%, which we rounded up to 8, that people feel they leave unsaid in a difficult conversation. So there's a little bit of research tied to that 8%.
Okay.
But it's really about the gap between the risk we know we should take and the risk we are taking.
Okay.
So what we help organizations do is help teach their leaders how to skillfully approach these difficult moments to create an environment that allows and enables risk taking, so that they can drive performance and execute their strategies. That's really that work we do around the last 8%.
Okay. Give me your succinct definition. What are you saying is last 8%?
It's really the difficult stuff, the stuff that makes us uncomfortable. So it can be saying no to someone who's going to be unhappy about it, giving somebody performance feedback, making a decision to fire someone and all the work it takes to replace them, and it's all those receiving critical feedback.
Yeah.
Is the last 8% moment. So anything that causes us to feel anxiety, discomfort, tension, and pressure is what a last 8% moment is.
Gotcha. And so, in the audience for this last 8%, is everyone in an organization, or are you targeting your leaders?
It is absolutely for everyone, and it starts with the senior leaders. So from
Okay.
a process perspective, how do we then help an organization become a last 8% culture? And by the way, many of our clients, we have an assessment where we can assess where an organization, a team is. They come out in what we call the family culture, where there's high connection, high care, but low courage, low accountability. And so that's a very common thing. And so there's lots of positives to a family culture, but it's not enough to be high performing.
Right.
So a lot of the clients we work with, we're really helping them build this muscle of courage and reasoned risk taking, where people are willing to give each other feedback. They're willing to challenge the status quo. They'll manage, they'll give feedback up and down. And so, that's the kind of culture we're trying to create. We do that by starting with the senior team.
Mhm.
You have to have the senior team bought in. They have to be modeling. They have to be coaching their own people. And so our last 8% culture system starts with an assessment, both quantitative but also qualitative interviews, and then work with a senior team. We made the mistake early on, maybe 5-6 years ago when we were first doing this work, of kind of one senior team saying, "Oh, we're good, we're fine, we only need one session," and we're like, "Okay." Well, guess what? We come to find out. I mean, what my business partner JP likes to say is, all teams have dysfunction. It's just a matter of how much and are they willing to look at it.
Yeah.
So number one is it starts with the senior team.
Yeah. Okay. And so you're the 8%, which I'm shocked it's that low, frankly, especially with the leadership team. But that 8%, you're trying to get them to identify. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to just track here. Those are the moments that, because they're difficult and they haven't been trained in those areas, that they just derail. And when they derail because of that high stress, it's toxifying kind of everything around them. So you're helping them identify when they are at one of those moments and how to respond instead of
Exactly.
their
Give
normal
them
path.
skill. And under pressure, we all have a default behavior. It's actually a neural pathway in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when faced with the last 8% moment, 68% of people in our research, their predictable default behavior is to avoid, to not step in, to kind of soft pedal it, not quite say the entire conversation or skip it completely, or not make the tough decision, give in to someone. By the way, I used to sometimes make a decision based on who was going to scream the loudest if they didn't get their way, and kind of give in to them because I didn't want to deal with them. So people either avoid making the tough decisions or having the tough conversations, or the other 32%, and I fall into this category sometimes, I'm in that difficult conversation, the other person starts getting defensive. Rather than stepping back and avoiding, now I step in, I'm coming on too strong, and I'm making a mess of it.
Yeah,
So we talked
escalating
about
it.
people either being avoiders or make a messers.
Make
So
measures.
I know, right? And we're all, complex human beings. There might be times we might be more likely to avoid, like a senior person challenging us, and times where we're more likely to make a mess, like, let's say, with my teenage daughters. I have one that's a yeller, and of course, what do? I yell back. Well,
Mm-hmm.
because of the cortisol effect, all I'm doing is teaching her to yell when she's frustrated, right? So I'm really working on not yelling at my teenage daughter. And so what we do is we help the teams recognize their culture norms, and then each individual, okay, like, what do we want the culture to be? Well, we don't want to avoid, but we also want to make a mess. We want to be skillful, and then have each person recognize their contribution, what they need to do. Are they more of an avoider and they haven't been naming the inconvenient truth, or have they been a bit more of a make a messer and they need to work on that? So it's about recognizing the aspiration the team has, the norms they want to create, where the opportunities are, and what each individual needs to do to contribute to that.
Yeah.
Once we've got the senior team on side, then only then do we cascade down to the rest of the organization. And we do that through what we call sprints. Sprints is where we enable each people leader. So it's not us doing it, it's not HR doing it, it's each
Mm-hmm.
people leader owning the culture on their team. And they do it in the flow of work. So it's not everybody going to a day of training. It's actually in their team meetings. The people leaders are given a video to play, a short video, a PowerPoint deck to walk them through how to have a conversation with their team about how are they doing in their last 8% moments? What kind of culture do they want to have on their team? And the people leader is leading that. Each sprint is 4 weeks, and there's either 2 or 3 sprints, and we leave some time in between sprints. So this process spreads out over. It's not a one-time thing, right? It's systemic. It spreads out over kind of
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 months.
Wow.
And we have gotten the most amazing feedback. People will say, we're having the best conversations we've ever had. Because who normally talks about how do we handle conflict on this team? How do we want to give each other feedback? How do we want to, and so it's stuff that people just don't talk about, yet it's so visceral. It's the stuff that keeps people up at night. So the fact that they're talking about it and dealing with it is so powerful for them.
Yeah. So you referred to the cortisol effect. I'm trying to track with that. So are
Okay.
you talking about kind of like the part of the brain that lights up? I mean, that's the chemical that's happening in our body. But then, if I understand correctly, it's like the amygdala lights up and just and everything else is bypassed. There's no prefrontal cortex because we're just in this like lid flipped moment because of cortisol is what you're saying, and or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, there's two different effects that I'm talking about, and you're
Okay.
right. The second one is the amygdala, but let me talk first about the first one I talked about, which is the searing in of memories,
Hmm.
which is what makes last 8% moments so important. Because if you avoid and don't step in when it was really important, then your team thinks, oh well, gosh, well then Bill doesn't back me up. Bill isn't willing to have the tough conversations, and so that
Oh,
avoiding,
okay. Yeah.
that then becomes your reputation because that's what people remember. They
Yeah.
don't remember when you spoke up when it was easy.
Right.
They remember when you didn't speak up when it was hard.
So you're not
The
talking about what's happening in the person in that moment. You're talking about in that moment, it's the lasting effect. Like we have to address this because it's what's seared into people's memory, and it's what it creates their perception of the entire culture.
Well, and then to your second point, then you want people not to go to their avoid or make a mess responses, which is your fight or flight. So you're right. The amygdala is the emotional part of the brain that moves us toward our fight or flight responses. So if I'm sitting in a meeting and suddenly somebody's making a suggestion that feels like a criticism and I'm getting defensive or I'm shutting down, that's my emotional brain moving me to either avoid or make a mess. What we're
Mhm.
teaching is that there's a middle ground. There's a middle ground where you push through the discomfort. You do step in, you do speak up, you do have that conversation, but you do it skillfully so you're not making a mess. So that's really at the core of what we're teaching is, yes, how to manage that amygdala, because the amygdala just wants us to move to our fight or flight, avoid or make a mess behaviors. You want to use your cognitive brain to step in more skillfully.
Okay. Gotcha.
Particularly in your last 8% moments, because they are so important.
Yeah. Right. 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 What do you see in terms of timeline where it really clicks? Do you see light bulb moments happening with especially your senior leadership team? And when does that seem to occur?
I mean, that's a how long is a piece of string question. That can be in the first 15 minutes where they're like, oh man, we're not, and it can be after three, it can be like in the third full day session, right? So it
Wow.
really depends on the team, the level of vulnerability, and it really, like, it does come down to whoever the senior leader, be it the CIO or the CEO, or you work with a chief, legal officer, whoever it is, that senior leader modeling. And we coach them, by the way, we
Yeah.
coach them on how to be vulnerable, how to model, how not to get defensive if somebody brings up something that they did, and so it's everyone in the room, and so that aha moment, yeah, and a lot of times it literally starts where we started. My title is partner and keynote speaker. Um, because one of the things we do is we do these 60, 90-minute, 2-hour sessions at a leadership event, a company retreat, whatever it is, and that's where the light bulb goes off. It's like, wow, that's the thing we're actually struggling with. We need you guys to come in and help us with this. So sometimes the light bulb is even before we've actually kicked off our culture system
Uh,
consulting work. It's just in that keynote.
wow. And at what point? So one of the things I'm asking this question because one of the things that I see in leaders is they struggle to talk about emotion. And when that word, it's like just a dirty word that's
Yep.
scary, and they don't want to admit it's scary, but that's really what it is. And at
Yep.
what stage does that come up as one of the X factors of what you do?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's actually one of the things we've been doing well. We've been doing this work for 27 years. Is we create language that makes it easier and safer to talk about emotions without actually talking about emotions.
Yeah.
So even last 8%, right? I'm not going to say, oh, I feel emotional. No, this is the last 8% moment. I feel scared. I feel angry. No, this is the last 8% moment. We have another language called dropping markers, which is a metaphor for losing your working memory, losing your clear thinking. And we literally, if we're live, we literally drop markers on the floor. And so we use these, so people can say, oh, I think we're dropping markers.
Yeah.
which is the way of, I think we're all angry, but without having to actually talk about emotions. So we give people language to use. Because you're right. I mean, look, I have degrees in mathematics, computer science. I don't want to talk about emotions. That's all soft and squishy, right? But you help me understand how my brain's working and how that's making me less smart when I'm triggered emotionally, then I'm
Yeah.
open to it, right? So that's
Yeah.
that's one of the things that really appealed to me in this work is it's brain science based. There's a
Yeah.
research backing to this work, and if you can help me understand how to get my brain working better, because it really isn't EQ or IQ. It's not emotional intelligence or IQ. It's EQ and IQ, right? If you can show up with the best of your cognitive thinking, really being able to listen, be creative, you can use the best of your IQ. So it's really the both together.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the EQ begats the IQ, right? Like you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you're derailed and your lid is flipped like a toddler, then you're gonna
Yep.
act like a toddler. Your brain's not being used.
Yeah, well, and actually, one interesting thing is even if you just lose, so everyone can hold at least 4 places in their working memory. So when you have 4 places you can hold in your working memory, and working memory is what gives you access to your cognitive brain, your IQ. It's like the pipeline to your IQ. So in this working memory, you have at least 4 places. When you have 4 items, there's actually 24 variables, 4 factorial, 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So you can see 24 different options when you're calm. Now, if you get really triggered and you go down to one thought, you've just gone from 24 to 1, you've lost. But even if you just get a little triggered, you get a little annoyed, and you drop one marker, you lose 1 place in your working memory, now you're down to 3.
Yeah.
Now there's 6
That's 6.
options.
Yeah.
You just lost 75% of your thinking capacity. You went from 24 to 6 options. So you lose a lot, not just when you get really angry, really shut down. Even if you get that little bit of irritation, or a little annoyance, or that little upset, you've actually just lost a huge part of your IQ and your best thinking, and you become a little more reactive, a little judgmental. That first marker that I drop, that's my listening marker. Doesn't work that well when I have it. But as soon as I get a little triggered, I'm not listening very well. And so, yeah, even just a little bit triggered emotionally can have a
Yeah.
huge effect, especially in the last 8% moments, right? Which are the most important moments.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, I hope that everyone listening can really resonate with what you're saying. I mean, I know I do. I can get somewhat triggered. I mean, just somewhat, and all of a sudden I'm thinking on a 20% of what I normally would in
Yep.
terms of strategy and long term thought and in my options. That's such a way to put
Oh,
it. My options just shrink to nothing
yeah.
because I'm in self protect mode.
And the irony is even though we can't see as many options, we become more certain that we're right. So we lose curiosity, what we think we're right, even though we're missing stuff. And so, yeah, it's not a good place to operate from, in terms of problem solving, motivating and inspiring people, trying to give feedback in a tough conversation.
Yeah.
All of these behaviors, all of these emotions are putting us in a place of being less skillful, less cognitively smart.
So I know obviously in the next, few minutes, you won't be able to unpack the full meat of this framework, but is there like, what's the kind of big first step? Is it recognizing that kind of key moment or where that trigger is beginning to happen and then stepping away so that you can
Yeah.
take space and come back with all 24 options? Like what's the,
Yeah, I mean, you literally just described one of the strategies. So I'll say
okay.
there's 2 things. One is an awareness from an organization that culturally they are a bit more family, people are avoiding, and that's costing them. Or let's say they're more high on courage but low on connection. That's more of a transactional culture where results matter over relationships. There's more toxic bad apples. Well, that has a negative. So number one is the organization recognizing that there's an opportunity to shift their culture, which will then help drive their performance and strategies, and key strategy. And then you're right, each person individually recognizing when I'm dropping markers, when I'm getting triggered emotionally, I'm moving to my avoid or make a mess default behaviors. What's something I can do to calm myself down? And if you are alone sitting at a desk, absolutely get up, go for a walk. The draft folder was designed for emotional intelligence. Write the
Yes.
email you want to write. Don't put it in the to list just in case. Save it the draft folder. go for a walk, come back, and I've done this many times. Never once have I looked at that email I wrote, down a marker in a triggered state and thought, yeah, that's the email I should send.
Yeah, that's that. Oh, I nailed it first try. Yeah.
Well, that's me at my best, right? That's going to have the impact I want.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. So when you're alone, even when you're with people, though, there's some very simple things you can do, like taking a drink of water, just taking a deep breath, not a big sigh, obviously, but taking a deep breath. Your fingers will actually start to curl. Not into a full fist, right? If you lose all your markers or, you're fully emotionally triggered, but you can actually open your palms and rest them on your lap.
Mm.
So there's a lot of little things you can do to kind of create that pattern interrupt to get control back from your emotional system, which is driving your behavior, to your cognitive system, where you can then be more curious, be more open, be more creative, and step in. Because again, for those that are avoiders, that emotional system is actually driving them to not step in, to avoid. So taking that drink of water, taking that deep breath can say, you know what, I need to say something here. And actually step in and push through the discomfort of feeling like you want to avoid so that you can step in that tough moment.
Yeah, that's really great stuff. Well, one of my favorites that I heard that it works for me is to like rub my index and thumb together and just kind of feel the ridges of the fingers. Like that's something for me that's like, all right, like I can just, that's my deep breath. That's my sip of water.
Perfect. Yeah. And especially anything kinesthetic. I coached a woman who had a brooch with a picture of her grandmother on it. She just kind of reach and touch and play with the brooch. So yeah, because your emotional system, your amygdala is part of your limbic system, which is your physical system. So yes, a change in your physiology. It can even be, if you're in avoid mode, you're going to be leaning back, making yourself smaller. Just open up and lean forward.
Mm.
You don't necessarily have to step in right in that moment, but that change in your body posture creates a little pattern interrupt that gives you a bit of an opportunity to then re-engage your neocortex.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So how do people, if this is resonating and they want to get in touch with you and find out more, what's their next step?
A couple different ways. Thank you for asking. One is I'm very active on LinkedIn. So it's Bill Benjamin on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out, ask questions. Our website is ihhp.com, which is Institute for Health and Human Potential. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but ihhp.com. And you can learn there both about our culture system work, our emotional intelligence work. So there are lots of great opportunities there to learn a lot more about us. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, very cool, man. This has been gold. So, people know how to reach you, but also, as all guests get, shameless plug. Do you want to just talk more about, what y'all do, or do you have something else entirely that you want to
the
throw
only
out
thing I
there?
want to say is we are working on the book. We wrote one 10 years ago called Performing Under Pressure. And now we're working on our book about the last 8%. And so just, keep an eye out for that. If you see it, a book, that's this work that we're talking about here. We're still working on the manuscript, so it's a ways off, but keep an eye out for that. It's my shameless plug.
Great. I love that. All right. Well, this has been a great interview. We're going to end off with our quick fire as we always do. You're in Chicago, right? Because I want to maybe personalize it. All right. So I'll just say this or that, and you tell me, which first comes to mind. iOS or Android?
Oh, iOS. Yeah, I'm iPhone all the way. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then are you using Apple Maps or Google Maps?
Google Maps. It seems to me to work a little better. Yes.
Nice.
Although darn Apple Maps work better in my Apple CarPlay, so I end up using it in my car.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. White Sox or Cubs?
Oh, Cubs. That's easy. If you've ever been to Wrigley and had a day at Wrigley, you'll become a fan.
Nice. Let's see. What was I going to say? I just lost it. All right. In theater or wait for it to stream?
I love going to the theater. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I do love going to the theater.
Okay.
Partly just to get the popcorn.
Math problems or people problems?
Well, I love
what you do want to tackle.
I love both. Yet I started my career studying math problems. I've now made my career about people problems. So I'd have to go with the latter at this point in my career.
Yeah, you don't want to go back to crunching math numbers anymore, right?
Absolutely not.
I love it. Hey, Bill, thanks so much. This has been a really great interview. Super insightful. very, very resonant topic that I think
Thank you.
everyone listening is going to be able to hear and go, yeah, no, this makes so much sense. And I also believe would be motivated to do something about it. I know that I've had 8% moments that have left the absolute wrong impression on my friends, my leadership team, my culture. So yeah, great stuff.
And we all have. And one thing I encourage people is not to be too hard on themselves. We're all not perfect. And so everybody has those moments. And Jason, thank you. You do a great job. Love your questions. And I can tell you're kind of trying to apply it to yourself, which makes this fun.
Good, man. Well, we will be in touch, and we'll put as much in the show notes as we can so people know how to get in touch with you as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Work Culture Podcast. This has been Bill Benjamin. Make sure you look him up and connect and ask questions and get curious. We'll see you next time.